Thank you so much, and we're now going to turn back to the floor speakers. There'll be more opportunity to deliver speeches of that format after the next round. So, second for the proposition is Martha Lucas. Martha is a second-year student of Human, Social and Political Sciences studying at Queen's College. She won the right to speak through open audition. Martha, you have the ears of the House.
Thank you. The moment Trump lost in 2020, he became a fascist. 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk, one of the world's most influential men, was seen to allegedly raise his arm in a Nazi salute at Trump's inauguration. This terrifying expression of extremist symbolism has since prompted a very heated debate of whether or not Trump, as leader of the Republican Party and President of the United States, is a fascist. His policies, since entering office this January, have been scrutinized for their fascist implications, ranging from an executive order to build a missile defense shield for the US, his attempts to, as was stated earlier, revoke birthright citizenship, to attacks on diversity and inclusion programs. Now, what I want to argue today is that this discussion has come too late. It's not what he's done since entering the White House in January that makes him a fascist, nor is it the 2024 election himself. No, it was at the moment of his historic loss in 2020 and the events that unfolded in the Capitol that Trump became a fascist. Now, he's a fascist once again in the White House. Now, as a humanities student, I wanted to start by setting out a definition for fascism. And I think I kind of predicted that the definition was going to be quite contested in this debate. So what did I do? Well, I wanted to go to ChatGPT, see if it could save me. However, even ChatGPT struggled, and I realized that the typical tenets of a fascist leader are hard to pin down and often not specific to fascism. So symbolism, nationalism, authoritarianism, even at times militarism. A leader who relies on symbols is not necessarily a fascist. A president who enjoys the company of Heil-Hitlering tech bros is not automatically a fascist himself. A ruler who over-deploys their military is not necessarily the next Stalin. Now, I argue what specifically makes a fascist, and what undoubtedly brands Trump a fascist, occurred in 2020 and is twofold. Firstly, it lies in the erosion of democratic process, and secondly, in the ability to evoke direct action from a group of adoring, worshipping supporters. In 2020, throughout the electoral campaign, Trump excellently sowed the seeds of doubt surrounding the upcoming election result. As early as October, he had stated that he wouldn't accept an electoral loss. If he lost, he'd face electoral fraud, and the vote had been stolen from him. Then, come election day, his loss marked only the 11th time in history an incumbent president was beaten, and he fulfilled the criteria of fascism perfectly. He eroded democratic process, notably the peaceful transition of power, by refusing to step down as president. He delegitimized his opposition and America's sense of democracy by saying the election had been stolen. And his MAGA supporters quickly followed suit. They quickly jumped on the bandwagon. The US had lost all sense of democracy, and Trump was the innocent victim. Now, criteria one, the erosion of democratic process, had been monumentally fulfilled. His loss was a turning point, the turning point. Trump descended into fascism. Then, never one to do things by halves, Trump went on to showcase his ability to evoke direct action, from his... Should I turn this off?
Yeah, should be.
Good to go? Probably because I'm walking around. My earring? Which one? The other one. That one. Here we go. That's all right. Is that better? Can you hear me? All right, carrying on. Where was I at? Then never one to do things by halves. Is it this one? We're good, okay. Trump went on to showcase his ability to evoke direct action from his sycophantic supporters in the 2021 Capitol attacks. Now, Erin referred to the way he left office as complaining. You said he did complain, but then he left. I argue this rather ungenerous description of what happened isn't quite accurate, and I'm going to offer a different narrative. Now, again, to use the words of the speaker before me, words matter. So let's look at some of Trump's. He tweeted, statistically, I won't do the voice, statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protest in DC on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. This leaves very, very little to the imagination. Purely through tweets, Trump was able to control the media circuit, inciting violence from a group willing to die for his stolen election, and quite frankly, willing to kill. 5 people died that day. And yet now we ask, is Trump a fascist? Following the horrific riot, and this is something mentioned by my former speaker, but I think the horror remains the same, Trump went on to tweet, "We love you, you're very special," to the rioters, just really patting them on the back, saying well done. Not only does he evoke violence from his supporters, he praises their violence, he praises the same coup that killed a police officer, he praises the mob that left 174 officers injured. This man has no regard for what is democratic, he has no qualms around violence, and he is able to convince hundreds to descend on one of America's most deeply democratic institutions. Yeah.
Did the left not encourage the Black Lives Matter riots?
Okay, I don't think that's sort of remotely comparable. I do go on to the Black Lives Matter riot, so that will be addressed then. Interesting point of information. The man telling the mob he loved them, this man was a fascist. He had fulfilled both criteria. He'd eroded the democratic process, and he'd evoked direct action from his supporters. And we should have seen it sooner. I mean, it's not like the clues weren't there. I'm no detective, but from just one example, I think it becomes very clear that we could have seen this coming, that we should have seen this coming. Let's look back to the summer of 2020, where Black Lives Matter protests swept across the US in response to George Floyd's brutal murder. Trump, as President of the United States, held so little regard for the rule of law, a key and fundamental tenet of our democratic process, that he tweeted, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." He asked if authorities could just shoot them in the legs or something, if he could shoot individuals at a peaceful protest in response to police brutality. I'm sure the irony is not lost on this room, even if it was lost on Trump himself. No, thank you, I've taken one. He branded Black Lives Matter activists as thugs, and yet 3 years earlier, in response to a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, said there were very fine people on both sides. This man praises the racist extremism which threatens our democracy. He requests violence against American citizens. His response to the Black Lives Matter protest shows another occasion where Trump is willing to ignore democratic process and convention just to serve his own ends. Freedom to assemble, this meant nothing to Trump, a man who just in a few months would take the final steps necessary to consolidate his fascism. So, what have I really told you? Well, I've told you this debate has come far too late. It was in 2020, at the moment of his election loss and subsequent capital attacks, that Trump cemented himself as a fascist. He fulfilled both criteria, the democratic process and evoking direct action from his worshipping supporters. We should have seen it coming. We could have predicted what this would lead to. Looking to today just briefly, because I'm aware I've not got much time left, his fascism is only growing. He made headlines with his proposals to kick all Palestinians out of Gaza and turn it over to the US, branding it a demolition site and blatantly opposing international law. This just shows this man holds no regard for the law that's essential to our democracy. He does not care. Trump is the government, and he is a fascist. He has been a fascist since 2020. He is a fascist today, and now he's a fascist with another 4 years in the White House. Thank you.